welcome to another episode. Special guest today, Eric Norton of Fat Packs.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much for having me.
We're going to have a conversation, and it will be about Eric's origin story and how he's come to this lofty place where he is with the leading podcast in sports collecting. But first, let me thank our sponsors, Beckett Media, obviously, maybe not obviously, but Beckett Media includes Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, perhaps even Fat Packs is included as a quasi-sponsor. Also, ComC, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike's Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, as well as Panini, Topps, and Upper Deck. Some great names, but I led off with Beckett Media, and that's where Eric is. Eric, how did you get there? What's your origin story?
Complete fluke, Jim. Absolutely complete fluke. I was at S&P Sports Cards in Grapevine, and I didn't know him at the time, but Justin Gruner was in there buying packs, and I overheard him say Beckett. And I caught him on the way out, and for whatever, he was having a good day, and he gave me his card, and he said, email me your resume, and I'll pass it on to Mr. Hitt, Dan Hitt.
Right.
And so I did.
Mr. Hitt, whom I met when he was 14.
Exactly. You have a long history with Mr. Hitt, don't you? Yeah. So I did, and when that happens, you think really nothing of it, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, 2 weeks later, Dan called me. And
cool.
I was actually on the road traveling to Houston to do some training down there for the job that I was working in. So, Dan called me and we had a phone interview, and then another phone interview probably a week later with Mr. Fleischer and Hitt. And then like 4 months went by and I didn't hear anything. And it was like a waiting process, and I was going nuts because I knew I could do the job. But
which was the job? Because I thought you didn't grow up being a collector.
I didn't. And I just knew that I could, like, once I got my foot in the door at Beckett, I could contribute something.
You could talk your way.
Yeah, I could talk my way, which is exactly what I did.
Which is probably what you did. But what position were they looking for? Was it a price
coin?
Kind of thing?
Yeah, coin analyst thing.
Oh, coin, okay.
Yeah, and I got hired as a coin. I don't, Lord forgive me, I totally lied and said, yeah, I can do coins, and I did. And
can means you're able.
Yes.
You're ready, willing, and able.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's a good attitude.
So I was a coin analyst for a few months, like 4 or 5 months, and then I got groomed into doing the hockey analyst position. And Justin helped groom me, and Dan Hitt helped groom me there. And by the time Dan retired, Justin just slid the hockey over to me, and I took over there. Yeah.
Are you're still doing hockey?
Still doing the hockey.
So what percentage? I mean, we'll talk about the podcast in another episode.
Sure.
But is that your main gig then?
It is.
And the podcasting is the most fun, but
right. The podcasting is my passion.
Yeah.
The hockey analyst is my main gig, and I split time equally between the hockey analyst and the Beckett Marketplace.
Okay.
So I kind of run the day-to-day on the Beckett Marketplace.
What's day-to-day on Beckett Marketplace? You mean solving problems?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Dealer issues, order issues, that kind of stuff. I'm the main contact for that. I also set up any kind of promotions or anything like that we have for that. And then it's a nice little mix because during the off season, there's not a ton of hockey products coming out. So I'm able to commit more time to the dealers. And we have, I think, 60 or 70 dealers on there, and they're really committed to what they do on the Beckett Marketplace. So they need a committed guy. But then
most of them are on it in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when a new hockey product does come out, Chris Carlin over at Upper Deck does a great job of giving me the checklist early, and then I can sort through that and start thinking about what things are going to be priced for, and commit full time to that once it drops live.
Has hockey been a sole Upper Deck thing since you started that, or was it more complicated when you started? So
once I took it over, it was just Upper Deck. They were the only license. With that being said, Leaf has great products that I think they're very underrated.
Okay.
But for fully licensed, fully licensed, it's been Upper Deck, and Upper Deck does a great. Like their release schedule is great. The way they put things out, you don't get too overwhelmed by back-to-back products.
Well, that's good. We share a common passion about going up to Toronto.
Oh, yes.
I used to love doing that.
That is my favorite show.
And is that kind of my favorite show outside America, I suppose. But consistently going up there a couple times a year back in the heyday, it was just fabulous because I was a hockey analyst as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Not just baseball, basketball, and football, and a lot of the book sets and things like that. That just was the dealers are very friendly, even though they think I talk funny, you talk funny, but they have their own Canadian colloquialisms. And,
sure.
But very friendly. And I think sometimes I've been up there, the dollar has gone both ways.
Right.
It's gone from being better to worse.
Recently, it's better. The last probably 4 times it's been better. However, that show is I don't, just like the National, they say if it exists, you're going to find it at the National.
Right.
Same thing with hockey products.
It's almost like a Canadian Hockey National.
Absolutely.
But there's Canadian baseball stuff too. Which
is a lot of fun. OPG Canadian stuff are just completely underrated, I think. And they're a lot of fun, especially through those 80s years. Those are tough kids.
Well, you're talking like a collector.
Oh, don't tell nobody.
Because I'm just thinking, I collected as a kid. I quit for a while, and then I came back, and I was a dealer, and then got into the publishing and the catalog and all that stuff. But so where are you on that spectrum? How have you moved from there? I know you used to work for the Mariners, I think.
Right.
So you were in Seattle, but you were close to the players,
right,
and all that. So how has that gone?
It's I've really scaled back, and if it's not Kyle Seager, I really don't care. And I don't say I don't care, but Kyle Seager is the focus of my collection.
He's your guy.
And he's my guy. It's like a triple fold story there.
Is he even the best player in his family?
I think he is, personally, but Corey will obviously have something to say about that. Yeah. But my son was born in 2010. I started working for the Mariners in 2010. And so I just thought, hey, this would be a good way to start something for my son. And eventually Elijah will get that. But right now, I'm having a lot of fun putting together Kyle Seager cards. He's very underrated.
Well, it's a great father-son hobby or brother hobby. It's I've talked in previous episodes about how this can be a very solitary hobby,
right,
or industry. But a lot of the success that I had is when it became more of a team at Beckett Publications, and so much of the fun of the industry now is just getting involved with other guys that like some of the same stuff.
Twitter has really done a great job of promoting that sense of family and community in the hobby. There's like a whole world of collecting that exists on Twitter that you probably wouldn't even know that's there. But it's once you get involved in it, it's a lot of fun to see.
Well, don't you get swallowed up in it?
You can. You absolutely can. A lot of time people, there's a phrase they say, they live rent free in your head, like somebody upsets you on Twitter. That's sad to see, but the positive coming out of it is really fun as well.
Well, they say like in marriage, you need to have 7 compliments for every criticism.
Right.
And it's actually a lot more than that, but, in fact, you need to have 0 criticisms.
Right.
But isn't Twitter that way? You can have 100 people tell you something good and one says something bad. And then it's an earworm.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. So you got to stay grounded and know who you are, know yourself, know your worth.
Okay. I felt on the hockey part of your job, I felt that I was more at a disadvantage for those sports I didn't know as well. Because I knew baseball, I knew basketball, I knew football. Hockey was definitely in 4th place for me.
Sure.
But for you, what have you done to become a hockey analyst that allows you to be on top of that? Are you more of a fan of the sport, or are you more, or do you collect any of hockey? Because Kyle Seager,
right, not hockey. I really got to stay on top of the game. I watch a lot of hockey, and if I'm not watching hockey, I watch the highlights. A great example of that is Dustin Byfuglien, who plays for the Winnipeg Jets, who played for the Chicago Blackhawks. I couldn't say his name. I said it Dustin Byfuglien all the time. Byfuglien, that's another one. Yeah. So Dustin Byfuglien is a great example of how I've grown as a hockey analyst, because I went from not knowing his name at all to saying it perfectly now. But now I know Blake Wheeler, and I know Patrick Laine, and I know that whole Winnipeg Jets team. It's important for me to stay on top of the game. Right. Especially, I think it's easier because the Stars play here.
Right. Yeah, we got a team.
Yeah, we got a team.
So which we didn't when we started the magazine.
Exactly. I mean, they had the Fort Worth Fire, right? Maybe. But staying on top of the game is important. And then, again, shout out to Upper Deck. They do a great job of letting you know who's in the product and who you should be paying attention to.
Yeah, I think Upper Deck has done a lot of great things, and the ability to pour all that energy and creativity into one sport and have some longevity. They have, I guess, not 30 years of history with hockey, but 29.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Because I think they started the year after they did baseball.
Right.
Well, we're going to talk again, I know, because we're so not competitors. But maybe you have a question for me about Beckett Publications back in the day, or anything about hockey, or just how we haven't overlapped that much, but you're working for a company that I helped start.
Sure. So I actually have a couple questions, if you don't mind. One, those first 4 covers are absolutely iconic in the hobby. How did you guys, I mean, looking back, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, Bill Jackson make a lot of sense, right?
Really tough calls.
Right. So how did you guys come up with the second covers, like John Elway and those guys?
Good point. We, my philosophy of this podcast is to be timeless and to be evergreen. We had a little bit of that with the magazines, not so much to create back issue demand, but we were really trying to straddle somebody that would be enduringly hot, and not just somebody that's hot for the moment. And so each of those covers, I think, reflects that, especially early covers, is that we weren't going to the hottest rookie that nobody'd heard of. But, as the years went by, it moved into who's going to be hot, not just who's hot.
Sure.
Or who's enduringly.
And so then the follow-up there, a magazine that I loved as a kid and that's not around anymore was the Future Stars.
I know.
And that was just so much fun. When you guys created that, what went into that process?
Well, we actually acquired that. It had been a magazine owned by Mary Houston, who started it, who was a very passionate minor league card and set, I guess maybe collector, dealer, did a little bit of everything, but mainly publishing and cataloging. And so she was very involved with that. And we didn't acquire her, but we acquired her magazine and retitled it and hired her to come down. And so she was down for a few years. And it just was challenging because so much of the young player appeal was going into the mainstream sets.
Sure.
At the tops. And at that point, you've got Donruss, Fleer, and Score, and Upper Deck, and many others. So the minor league sets, their heyday was, I think, thought to be in the 70s and 80s. And then by the time we're in the 90s and the 2000s, they weren't as vigorously pursued, I don't think. And so it didn't have the circulation at some point. We tried retitling it and moving it around, but I love to create things. Sure. I don't love pulling the plug on things.
Right.
I don't mind adapting things, but every publication has to find its audience. And we had the beauty of having 4 separate sports, and then of course we had NASCAR, and we had golf, and those were very clear. Future Stars had more trouble finding its niche.
I see. Was there? I've been told that you guys had photo shoots with athletes in the past. Is that true?
Not very often.
Not very often.
Sometimes. But we mainly worked with photographers.
Okay, I see.
That already had that going. We had of course, Brad Newton, my close friend, was our first freelance photographer, and he was the photographer for the Rangers. So all the American League teams coming through.
I asked that because I found a box in our library that was full of old magazine covers that had been autographed, and they're all addressed to Jim Beckett or Dr. Beckett. And I was just wondering, were those like through the mail type things or?
I have no idea.
That's funny.
It's possible. I just don't, I don't remember. Maybe somebody did that back in the day, but, the covers that were intended to be autographable, even the back covers and things like that. So a lot of, I consider myself a creative guy, but more importantly, I surrounded myself with some really creative people too.
Sure.
And that creative process was we're kind of out of time here, but that creative process led to a podcast that you started after I was gone, and now I'm doing one, and I'm enjoying that creative process. So, Eric, thanks for being with me. We'll meet again in a few days and talk about your excellent podcast and compare some notes about this great hobby. So again, thanks for sharing your story.